Mcleod Chapman.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Are we ready for a little reading? Yeah? Nice. All right, well, hopefully this will not suck. My name's Clay. Thank you very much for letting me come here. Thank you for inviting me. This is awesome. This is like, you should come to Brookdale more often. So I'm going to read two stories. And first one, totally, you're going to have to use your suspension of disbelief on this one. To get into it, you have to think of me as a woman. Think of me as a woman, and it is all downhill from there. Woman, I should have shaved this morning, but wasn't in the cards. This is for you, Suzanne. This is a story. This is a story called The Suitor's Ward. The Suitor's Ward. Paul proposed last night. He wanted to get down on his knee for me, popping the question properly, but I insisted that he stay in bed. See, I was afraid that his stitches might rip. One loose suture could send his intestines spilling all over the floor. Now, better let those ligatures heal up before you even think about tying the knot, I whispered, hoping not to wake up any of the other patients. Paul had stepped on a landmine the day we met. The paramedics told him to hold his arms like this, hugging his stomach, just so he could holster his own internal organs long enough for me to take a pair of scissors and cut through his flak jacket. The blast had soldered his zipper into a strip of metal, the intense heat fusing the teeth together. The second I saw you standing over me, he said, thought I died and gone to heaven. The men here all call me their angel. Whenever I'm on my rounds, passing through the officers' ward, you can see their faces brighten, their spirits lift. I mean, one smile from me and these soldiers, you would think that these soldiers had forgotten all about their injuries. I mean, you would think that they'd been healed. But the Red Cross never prepped us nurses for the number of marriage proposals we would get. See, I walk down the aisle almost every day. These beds may as well be church pews, each one holding their own terminal case. My bridesmaids are all wearing nurse uniforms. The best man had his legs blown off by a piece of shrapnel. That's how I met John. God, he'd come in with half of his battalion, suffering from severe mortar wounds to his upper torso. His lower jaw had been blown off completely in the explosion. The bottom half of his face just completely missing. I had to make sure that nothing obstructed his breathing, just listening to his inhales all night. If something got caught in his chest, if his wheezing shifted in pitch, well, it was up to me to locate the obstacle, clearing a path through his windpipe. The doctor here gave him a 10-to-1 chance of surviving the night. None of the other nurses thought he would make it to morning, so I simply brushed the hair out of his face, combing it back with my fingers. He was a handsome man. I could tell. He woke up. About an hour or so later, I saw his eyes for the first time, this deep green, just welling up with enough tears to rinse the grit from his temples. So I just leaned over and pressed my lips against his eyelashes. feeling them flutter across my mouth. I held his hand for almost 2 days straight. Now, even when it grew cold, I kept my grip. Most soldiers will die in this ward. These beds will be their last, but no one dies alone. No soldier should ever feel as if he has been abandoned, not when I am on duty. Now, that is the promise that I made. Now, call it palliative care when cure is uncommon, but I have been trained to tend to these men's loneliness. A patient will give up before their body does, which only worsens their condition. So I try to give them something to live for, simply by showing that I care. It's been difficult dating, you know? Sure. One of the nurses here tried to set me up with her brother-in-law, who just so happened to be in the service. He was nice enough. He took me to the movies, coffee afterwards. He even walked me back to my barracks. We kissed, briefly, but still felt awkward, Not that he had done anything wrong, really. I mean, he had been a perfect gentleman all night. It's just that you get so used to comforting the suffering that when nothing's wrong, you feel as if there's something missing. Not that I'm so beautiful. I mean, you would be hard-pressed to pick me out from a crowd. And after a 16-hour shift, oh God, I am so exhausted. I must look like a zombie walking back to my bear. Now I realize that this has nothing to do with my looks, but more with what's happening out there in the field. We will pull these cots out of storage whenever there's an air raid, welcoming in the wounded with enough morphine to send them right back off to sleep. And when they come to, if they come to, they wake up to me. And these soldiers can act just like little boys sometimes, especially at night. During the day, they're fine, but as soon as the lights slip off, this sense of defenselessness slips right in, You would think that they were all afraid of the dark, calling out for us nurses. Now, we have to schedule twice the amount of inspections at night, checking up on everyone's condition 2 or 3 times throughout the evening. And that's when the soldiers propose. See, I'll be on my rounds when one of them will suddenly grab me by the wrist and just drag me over to their bed, just begging to wed. If he is an amputee, he will fall out of his cot on purpose, just so I have to pick him back up again and put him into his bed, huh? When I get better, why don't you and me run away, huh? As soon as I am on my feet again, let's get hitched. Oh, the second I am out of this hospital, I am coming back with a ring. The trick is to never say no. Not outright. You have to keep their hopes up so that they will heal. Most of the time, you are the only hope they have. If they will not pull through for themselves, they will do it for you. So I started saying yes. God, I said yes to Private Thompson with his torn abdomen. I said yes to Lieutenant Miller with 3/4 of his body covered in 3rd-degree burns. I said yes to every soldier whose chances at survival continued to dwindle the more their fear of death overwhelmed them. And I said yes to Tom, who had been shot 5 times straight across the chest during hostile fire, puncturing his lungs in 3 different places. His breathing? God, his breathing bubbled over so much the doctor said that he would drown before they would even be able to put him onto the operating table. And when he heard this about himself, when he heard what the doctor had said, Tom just took me by the hand, his chest heavy every breath just whistling through his wounds, saying, I'll be thinking of you in there. I'll be thinking of you too, Tom. If I make it through this, ma'am, will you please come visit me? Of course, Tom. I promise. The turnover of soldiers is so swift here. It is becoming difficult to keep up with my marriage vows now. And they keep coming in. One right after another. When one bed empties, I have a new fiancé filling in. And there's barely enough time to change the bedspread. When a patient passes away, I have to wheel the body out of the ward, making sure to smile at the soldier in the neighboring bed, my lips lifting his spirits, holding his hopes up. I am a widow. 100 times over. This clipboard is my bouquet. It is a floral arrangement of ailments, assorted with a half dozen amputees, sprigs of injuries. I will toss it to the other nurses once my shift is over, all of them scrambling to grab it, just to see who gets to wed next. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God, we're off. Whoa, doozy time. I hope we're still friends. I would say, if we are still friends, I may lose your friendship now with this last story. But that said, hey, thank you very much for having me, guys. Thank you for having me. This one, this one's a doozy. This one, I love you all. It's called Grand Marshal. Popped my first shot in the backside of some majorette's head, watching her skull combust through my crosshairs. This pink mist fogged up the air in between her pigtails, nothing but red confetti and cerebral streamers showering down on the crowd. That girl? Well, she had been twirling her baton as if it were some Molotov cocktail, all lit and ready to burst. The entire high school pep squad is swarming around the front of the parade, ready to riot. You know, their arms raised over their heads, just brandishing their banners in tandem to one another. Whole color guard is praising Allah, shouting out obscenities at us soldiers. I took another one down before she could even catch her baton, watching the rod spin through the air as her body fell to the ground. And we're rolling over Broad Street, heading into the center of town. This entire cavalcade of cars and floats driving down the main drag, turning left on Elm, right on Vine, past the courthouse, town hall, all the shops. Even the grocery store I used to work at back when I was in high school, bagging these people's sandwich meats for $3.25 an hour. Well before that recruiting officer waltzed into the back room on my lunch break. Well before he slipped me his business card, scribbling his extension down on the back so that I could talk to him personally, because he saw the potential in me, the potential to kill. And well before making my way back home, a war hero, the proud recipient of the Medal for Combat Valor, nothing but this ribbon flickering against my chest, pinned to my neatly pressed uniform, telling my hometown that I had been in direct combat with the enemy force. And worlds before they threw me my own parade! And they got me perched in the back seat of this classic 57 Chevrolet convertible, donated by Gentry's Auto, located right off of Route 29, all wrapped up in ticker tape and paper chains, an American flag sprawled across the front hood, and they got the roof peeled back, letting me sit topside just next to this year's Miss Rappahannock. Little tiara on top of her head, her sash wrapped over her shoulder, looking like a satin bandolier, huh? Holding enough ammunition to shoot her way all through town. And her elbow is bent, hand cupped, just waving with her wrist to the crowd down below. And our convoy sweeps past this militia of Shriners. These geriatric gorillas tossing rock candy at the kids along the sidewalk. All these, their miniature cars just sputtering underneath our line of fire. I learned that a medulla oblongata shot jerks their neck back quick, twirling the tassels on top of their head. So I see how many fezzes I can hit off within a minute, just, like plucking off Shriners left and right, like I'm playing some arcade game where every bullseye wins you another ticket. Bling, bling, bling. People keep throwing these little handfuls of confetti into the air, these little bits of paper picked up by the wind, scattering everywhere like a sandstorm hitting me right in the face. The desert is digging into my skin. The particles burrow through my flesh, finding their way inside through my ears, my nose, my mouth. I am taking the desert with me wherever I go. And I spot old Miss Rollinger in the crowd, just waving her flag at me. Yeah, picked her off with a single shot, thinking of her working back behind the counter at the Cardinal Pharmacy, where when I was just 12 years old, she caught me shoplifting one of the dirty magazines off the rack in the back, slipping some hustler underneath my shirt, banning me from stepping through the doors of that store for looking at such filth in the first place. The only type of girl I've seen for the last year of my life, coming from magazines just like that. The only kind of girl willing to give up her cunt to a grunt comes packaged in a brown paper bag. Ooh. Sorry, not like the girls back here at home. Not like my girlfriend, kept her legs squeezed tight my last night before shipping off. Two of us sitting in the back seat of my car, pushing my hand away every time I try to slide it up her thigh, whispering to me that she wanted to wait to save herself for when I got back. And I remember thinking to myself, I am never coming back. I am as good as dead the second I say goodbye. Please don't make me go. Please don't make me leave. And I spot her standing in front of the post office, just leaning against a mailbox, and she is smiling at me, looking so proud, like I am her hero, some knight in shining armor. I get her right between the eyes. Her head opens up in the rear, her brains blossoming over the eagle emblem painted across the front of the post office. I am a hero, all right. I hear my name called out from the crowd, echoing through the streets, and there's this ringing in my ears coming from the marching band up ahead, and all I can see are these rows of coiled brass, these piles of twisted intestines exposed to the open sun, like an entire battalion's worth of soldiers left in the desert days after dying, yellowed from decomposition, and the hollow cylinders keep hissing with these trapped gases like a steaming pile of entrails, sputtering up the stars and stripes forever for the 15th time in a row. So I start taking out everyone I see. Mr. Sims, my boss from work. Mr. Pritchard, my high school principal. Father Dervisham from church. Sally Stanton, the first girl I ever felt up. Sean Thomas, her boyfriend. Jimmy Hodgkin, my best friend from the 5th grade. Even my own mom and dad looking so proud of me. I wiped the smiles off of their faces with a single shot. Their lips unraveling the second that bullet pushes past. I am all out of rounds by the time my car pulls up to the bandstand. I swear I can hear the hollow discharge of my rifle clicking through the air, but I can't let go of the trigger, you know? My finger locked into place. Only for Miss Rappahannock, step up to the microphone and clear her throat. The Marines have honored you for your valor, for your sense of duty, loyalty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, patriotism, and personal courage in the face of danger. We salute you, son. Welcome home. I head back to my parents' house after the parade. I make my way up to my bedroom, closing the door behind myself and locking it. I open up the top dresser drawer, push back the socks, slipping my Marine issue 9mm pistol out from its holster. I watch my reflection in the bedroom mirror as it slips the muzzle past its lips, resting the barrel over its tongue. My reflection never flinches, never blinks. Even when it squeezes the trigger, watching the backside of its head burst open, a tuft of sand spilling out from the exit wound. The desert spreads over the rest of my room, covering the walls, the carpet, the bed. Sand? Sand seems to find its way in everything, huh? Thank you, guys.
Have a wonderful evening.
It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Turner.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you all for having me here. And Clay, thanks for that amazing work. Hopefully we'll have time. We'll work out where you come up again if you want to, or if the audience. We'll work that out once we get there. But thank you for having me here. It's Veterans Day, right? And I'd just like to take a second. I'm going to read a couple of names. That I haven't ever done this before, but for Hathaway, Chakowski, Bosch, and Fiorillo, and Lou, and Knight, Sergeant Zavala. That's the squad that I was in when I was in Iraq. But tonight, maybe just for a moment, before I start reading poems and stuff, I just have a second of silence or two. Maybe you can think of people you know that have been in a war zone, whether they're in uniform or civilian, or just those that we know are over there now in some place like that around the world. You know? I think that's maybe... I'll just shut up. Just take a second and maybe think about that. Short guy. Here, bullet. If a body is what you want, then here is bone and gristle and flesh. Here is the clavicle snapped wish. Aorta's open valves, the leap thought makes at the synaptic gap. Here is the adrenaline rush you crave, that inexorable flight, that insane puncture into heat and blood. And I dare you to finish what you've started, because here, bullet, here is where I complete the word you bring hissing through the air. Here is where I moan the barrel's cold esophagus, triggering my tongue's explosives for the rifling I have inside of me. Each twist of the round spun deeper. Because here, bullet, here is where the world ends every time. Which I don't know how that is for you guys, but I still think that's kind of a weird poem, honestly. But I still don't quite understand it all, you know. But and it's probably the most personal poem of this book. Most of the poems are not written about me, because to be honest, my life there wasn't very interesting, but what was happening around me I thought was incredibly important. And so when we come back from the bases, sometimes we'd be very busy, and we'd have just very little time. And I take time to write in my journal what had happened that day, and sometimes a poem would come out. Other times it's just pure boredom, for it seemed like days on end, like where your teeth would melt because it's so friggin' boring, you know? And I had plenty of time to write poems then. Other guys would work out, pop ripped fuel like candy so they could get all buff when they came back home and stuff. But I wrote poems and read books and stuff. And I'll read some of those poems tonight, and then a couple of new poems as well. So this poem is called 2,000 Pounds, and after an investigation they found it was 800 pounds, but I'd already published it, so I don't know what to do. There's my disclaimer. My apologies. And it's set in Asher Square, Mosul, which is a real place. So if we could walk one day down the street, you know, in Mosul, dressed like we are right now, you could see a sign at one point in the town that says, in Arabic, 0.5 kilometers, and below it says in English, Asher Square, 0.5 kilometers up ahead. But at the end of the poem, there's a rhyme with that phrase, and so it seems sort of made up in a way, but it's a real place. And it tries sort of verse stanza by verse stanza to sort of pan around a traffic circle as a bomb goes off. So we'll see if that works. It begins simply with a fist, white-knuckled and tight, glossy with sweat, with two eyes in a rearview mirror watching for a convoy. The radio, a soundtrack that adrenaline has pushed into silence, replacing it with a heartbeat, his thumb trembling over the button. A flight of gold, that's what Safwan thinks, as he lights a Miami, draws in the smoke, and waits in his taxi at the traffic circle. He thinks of summer 1974, lifting pitchforks of grain high in the air, the slow drift of it like the fall of Shafa's hair. And although it was decades ago, he still loves her, remembers her standing at the canebrake, with a buffalo cooled shoulder deep in the water, pleased with the orange cups of flowers he brought her. And he regrets how so much can go wrong in a life, how easily the years slip by. Light as grain, bright as the street's concussion of metal, shrapnel traveling at the speed of sound to open him up in blood and shock. A man whose last thoughts are of love and wreckage, with no one there to whisper him gone. Sergeant Ledoux of the National Guard speaks but cannot hear the words coming out. And it's just as well his eardrums have ruptured, because it lends the world a certain calm. Though the traffic circle is filled with people running in panic, their legs a blur like horses in a carousel, turning and turning with the tires spin and the Humvee flipped to its side. The gunner's hatch he was thrown from, a mystery to him now. A dark hole in metal the color of sand. And if he could, he would crawl back inside of it. And though his fingertips scratch at the asphalt, he hasn't the strength to move. Shrapnel is torn into his ribcage, and he will bleed to death in minutes. But he finds himself surrounded by a strange beauty, a shine of light from the broken, a woman's hand touching his face tenderly the way his wife might, amazed to find a wedding ring on his crushed hand, the bright gold sinking in flesh going to bone. Rashid passes a bridal shop on a bicycle with Sefa beside him. And just before the air ruckles and breaks, he glimpses the sidewalk reflections in the storefront glass. Men and women walking and talking or not. An instant of clarity. Just before each of them shatters under the detonation's wave, as if even the idea of them were being completely destroyed and stripped of form. The blast tearing into the mannequins who stood as though husband and wife only a moment before, who cannot touch one another, who cannot kiss, who now lie together in glass and debris, holding one another in their half-armed embrace and calling this love if this is all there will ever be. The civil affairs officer, Lieutenant Jackson, stares at his missing hands, which make no sense to him, no sense at all. to wave these absurd stumps held in the air, where just a moment before he'd blown bubbles out the Humvee window. His left hand holding the bottle, his right hand dipping the plastic ring in soap, filling the air behind them with floating spheres like the oxygen trails of deep ocean divers. Something for the children, something beautiful. Translucent globes with their iridescent skins drifting on vehicle exhaust in the breeze that might lift one day over the Zagros Mountains. That kind of hope. Small globes which may have astonished someone on the sidewalk 7 minutes before Lieutenant Jackson blacks out from blood loss and shock, with no one there to bandage the wounds that would carry him all the way home. Nearby, an old woman cradles her grandson, whispering, rocking him on her knees as if singing him to sleep, her hands wet with their blood, her black dress soaked in it as her legs give out and she buckles with him to the ground. If you'd asked her 40 years earlier if she could see herself an old woman begging by the roadside for money with a bomb exploding at the market among all these people, she'd have said, to have your heart broken one last time before dying, to kiss a child given sight of a life he could never live, it's impossible. This isn't the way we die. And the man who triggered the button, who may have invoked the prophet's name or not, he is obliterated at the epicenter. He is everywhere. He is of all things. His touch is the air taken in, the blast and the wave, the electricity of shock. His is a sound the heart makes quick and the panic's rush, the surge of blood searching for light and color. That sound the martyr cries, filled with the word his soul is made of. Inshallah! But still hanging in the air over Asher Square, the telephone line snapped in two, crackling a strange incantation the dead hear as they wander confused amongst one another, trying to learn each other's names, trying to comfort the living in their grief, to console those who cannot accept such random pain, speaking Habib, softly one to another there in the rubble and debris, Habib, over and over, that it might not be forgotten. No, that's cool. Thank you. Does that make any sense? So it's already printed in there, but I guess I could retype it and fix it. So if you have ideas on any of these poems, let me know. It's always a work in progress, I wrote a note to myself here to read a sex poem, so I'm going to read a sex poem. See what page that is. There's a sex poem in here? Right? So I can't promise you to be cool, though. Probably won't be. And it's for Ishtar, who's the goddess of love and war, right? And it's called Last Night's Dream. In the dream, her breasts become confused in my lips. I shoot an azimuth to her navel while her fingertips touch me with concussions, as if explosives rang through the nerves of my body, as if I am strung with wire, a huge receiver of UHF radio transmissions, frequency hopping with our tongues as we kiss, and I slide into her with a sound of flashbang grenades that make her eyes cloud over and smoke from the heat of it. In the dream, she kisses Arabic into my skin, and I understand every word of it. I transcribe it backwards into cuneiform and stone. I rename the arteries and veins for every river and wadi from Dohuk north to Basra south. I feel for this geography of pleasure. My tongue is a marker that writes even in the rain, even in salt and sweat, and I write with it now over every curve and turn of her body. In the dream, our orgasm destroys a nation. It leaves thermite and gunpowder in the air above us, a crackling of radio static as we kiss on, long into the denouement of skin and fire, where medevac helicopters fly in the dark caverns of our lungs in search of the wounded, and we breathe them, one to another, a deep rotor wash of pain and bandages. So I'll say that last part real quick, just for a moment, not to be too much like Robert Bly, he does this all the time. But I think it's important because when I was writing this poem in Iraq, I was writing it for Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, and I was thinking more about the intimacy, not me and some desired person back home or a girlfriend or something. I was thinking more of us as a nation. We. The intimacy we now have, now that we've invaded Iraq, for the rest of our lives, with Iraq. So I say, where medevac helicopters fly in the dark caverns of our lungs in search of the wounded, and we breathe them, one to another, a deep rotor wash of pain and bandages. as the election campaign was going on earlier this fall, I often would say to people, not necessarily in that context, but it's on the same riff, that if you ever in your life hear a politician say the word victory when speaking of war, or winning the war, question that politician. There is no victory in war, and there's no winning the war. Like how many people have died in the Iraq War? How much is that? 4,000. It's like 4,100 and something like that. That's it, right around there. Is that the right number? What's that? What's that? Well, how many Iraqis have died? Aren't there more people who have died? I mean, more people have died, right? How many people have died in the Iraq War? There's different figures out there. How many? I'm not saying any of us know, because I don't actually know, but what are some of the figures you guys have heard? How many is that? Have you heard? 4,000. Oh, yeah, right. Well, I've heard studies. I've heard some studies say there's 100,000. That's the lowest I've heard, their administration. At one point. It might be changing. And another one, the Lancet study out of England, said about 400,000. There's another study that says about 1 million or 1.2. And then on the far edge, there's one that says 2 million. But I'm not sure, I have to double check it. You can go check this out yourself. But I think they're including the years of sanctions with the infant mortality rate, things like that, and then also the first Gulf War in 1981, right? But let's lowball it. Take the lowest figure you can get, 100,000 people. What does it say about a country, us, who can bury 100,000 people, put them in the earth, and take the last breath of their lives, and know nothing about them? Yeah? To paraphrase William Stafford, he didn't say this part, but I don't have any answers. Brian from Fresno, California, I don't have any answers. But to paraphrase William Stafford, he says the job of the writer is not to pose the solutions to the questions, but the job of the writer is to ask the questions more clearly. So if in some way I can help in that process, then great, fantastic. The 107s have a crackling sound of fire and electricity, of air-ruckled heat. And when they pinwheel over the rooftops of Haman al-Alil, they just keep going, traveling for years over the horizon to land in the meridians of Divisadero Street, where I'm standing early one morning on a Memorial Day in Fresno, California, which is where I'm from. The Veterans Parade scattering at the impact. Mothers shielding their children by instinct. Old war vets crouching behind automobiles as police set up an outer cordon for the unexploded ordnance. Rockets often fall in the night sky of the skull. Down long avenues of the brain's myelin sheathing. Over synapses and the rough structures of thought. They fall into the hippocampus, into the seat of memory, where lovers and strangers and old friends entertain themselves, unaware of the dangers headed their way, or that I will need to search among them, the way the bomb disposal tech walks tethered and alone down Divisadero Street, suited up as if walking on the moon's surface, as the crowd watches just how determined he is to dismantle death, to take it apart piece by piece, the bravest thing I've ever seen. So what made me write that poem? Like I'm sitting in Iraq, I'm a team leader, right? Why do I write that poem? What sparks it? I don't know what sparks you, but there's a couple images, for example, in this one that came to mind. It was over the course of a month. I remember it was August of 2004 when this poem happened. We were out at a small base 20 kilometers southeast of Mosul, in the northern part of Iraq. And at one point, this Katyusha rocket, which I didn't say the title, that's the title, Katyusha rocket. And this Katyusha rocket flew over, and like that type of weapon, it's notoriously inaccurate. And this one was as well. It flew over and blew it out in the desert, right? But as the parlance, how you'd say in the military, you'd say it's a significant emotional event. Like when a rocket comes at you, that's all that exists for a moment. But then luckily it blew up out in the desert. But that's not what the poem's about, right? It's these rockets traveling over the horizon and to land among us. So I'll ask you, how many of you here know someone who's in Iraq or Afghanistan, so the war we're finally starting to talk about, is there now or will be going there? If you mind raising your hands and stuff. And those of you up front, can you guys look back? Because I can see everybody. Look around. See all these hands up? How many hands will be up in the future, So what I'm saying is now that I wrote the poem when I was there, this is one of the few poems where I was already starting to think about the future, that there would be many soldiers coming back among us, these veterans, and many of them will have a lot of explosive material inside of them. And how will they walk down that street within themselves and deal with this explosive material? You know? What can we do to help them? What can you do to help them? Yeah? Not to put you on the spot, but you got a lion on your chest or something like that? Yeah. What's your name, sir? Matt. We got Mike over here on the side. Who's the lady in the back with that cool hat? You know? Yeah. Christy? That's pretty good on my hearing. I usually don't hear stuff very well, so. You know, what will you guys do? You know, Matt or Christy, what will you do? I'm not asking you to answer now, but you know, this isn't just some general question. I'm asking, I mean, really, what will you do in your life to help some of these problems? Is there something you can do? I'm going to continue to read poems, but afterwards, if you're interested in that, then we can meet afterwards and we can talk more about that. How are you guys doing tonight? Are you doing all right? With Clay, with that huge emotional beginning, and then I come up here with more like, well, this sucks, and this sucks, and you know, it's like, man, you guys are, man, you know?
Got another sex poem?
Sadly, no. Well, maybe we'll see what we can do. But I'm going to read another one right now, but maybe we can. There's one that's sort of on the fringe of that, but it's not so much. I'm going to read one for a person who looked up this poem and was interested in it, and I guess it. Well, I'll read it. Before going to Iraq, the unit that I was in, we were practicing out in the forests near Seattle, in Fort Lewis, Washington. We'd go out there and bang, 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 shoot these blank rounds, right? And then you'd run out and you'd have ultimate bang, bang. Put it in, right? Or take it out of your magazine pouch and pop it in. Bang, 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 just like when you were a little kid. We actually ran out of the rounds and you just act like you had rounds and stuff. But we'd come back after training and you could see on these big screen TVs in the day room, they call it, where we work, excuse me. And you could see the news reports in Iraq because we were the first replacements. We went in actually on the 3rd of December of 2003. And during those months when the war and the invasion initially started, we could see the news reports coming back just like you guys saw. But I was thinking, you know, these are the people, they're like, in a way, like waiting for me, you know? And they actually know how to pull a trigger and shoot at somebody. They've done it. I never did that, you know? But I'm about to go meet these people. And I know that created a certain kind of fear, I think. But it was masked with bravado. Just like my very first poem when it came out, here, bullet. If a body, you know, that bravado is really just fear masking itself, you know? But anyways, when I was there, to sort of embolden themselves, a lot of soldiers would say, I'm going to go over there and shoot somebody in the face. And I hear that. That's pretty much a direct quote, verbatim, what you heard across the company, about 200 soldiers. And I remember thinking that, no, we didn't really want to do that, you know? I knew it wasn't true, but I understood the reasoning behind it. And Sadi, in the year 1258, a Persian poet, he said, in the Gulistan, he said, it is a condition of wisdom in the archer to be patient, because when the arrow leaves the bow, it returns no more. And Sadiq means friend. It should make you shake and sweat, nightmare you, strand you in a desert of irrevocable desolation, the consequences seared into the vein. No matter what adrenaline feeds the muscle of courage, no matter what God shines down on you, no matter what crackling pain and anger you carry in your fists, my friend, it should break your heart to kill. And when we came back from Iraq, I will say that I never heard that phrase ever again. Go shoot somebody in the face. Never heard it again. For what that's worth. How we doing time-wise, boss? I lose when I come up here. I put a watch one time, and I looked at it. It was totally meaningless. Didn't mean anything. I had no clue how I was doing or anything. When I came back from Iraq, the first weekend I came back, I was up in Seattle, right? It was Halloween, and then President Bush was reelected, and then the next weekend I got to go out. We were given the weekend off, right? So I headed up to Seattle with a friend, and they had this Burning Man event. It was sort of, you know, one of the tertiary ones. They didn't actually have the effigy where they burn it and stuff because it was in Seattle. But they had it was raining, sort of, custom. It was, you know, November, and there was an old supermarket, and you could see on the outside where the where it had the name of the supermarket, but it had taken off, so like the ghosts of the letters are still in the building, you know? And then you pay your money, you get a little thing around your wrist and stuff. And I walked in, and the first thing I saw was this guy go by in he's 6-foot-tall Energizer bunny. The pink bunny with the big bass drum, the whole thing, on skates. He just went rolling by. I was like, whoa, what the hell? You know what I mean? And right behind it, as he went by, then I saw this woman walking in, and she is an amazing woman, and she had this big mane of hair. She was wearing like a bustier, leather bustier, with like thigh-high boots. They were like wet leather, PVC leather stuff, you know? And she had this guy, she had a leash on this guy following her around his neck, and all he's wearing are like these leather Speedos or something. And she's like pulling him, and I'm like, where am I? You know, exactly. But, you know, I've been back from Iraq in that theater, as they call it, which is weird language, but we come back only a week previously. And the first thing I see in America is an imagistic line with Iraq. Because where else have we seen people leading other people with leashes, you know? Abu Ghraib prison, right? So in a sense, I was like, wow, this is cool. There's this hedonism, a joy of life in one sense, but at the same time, it's hard for me not to have these imagistic lines going back home. In a similar sense, I went to Lowe's home improvement store. And I was, you know, we go to Lowe's sometimes, right? And I was doing a project around the house. I needed some nails. So I walked down the aisle with the nails, and I was looking, they got a gazillion nails. So I saw ones that wasn't what I was looking for, the scaffolding nails, double-headed nails. And I started looking at them a little closer, and if you get the right size, they look a lot like the firing pin in the weapon I used to carry. I started looking around, trying to see, where's the war here in America? You know, it's difficult to have that connection back home. And at the same time, I was getting emails from some of the guys who were in the unit, like Bosch, for example. I get emails of what was still happening in Iraq. And it was percolating up. And this poem is one of the poems that came out of that. This is part of a new book that I'm working on. It's called At Lowe's Home Improvement Center. One. Standing in aisle 16, the hammer and anchor aisle, I stare at a 50-pound box of double-headed nails I've busted open by accident. The oily bright shanks and diamond points reminding me of firing pins from M4s and M16s. In a steady stream, they pour out onto the tile floor, constant as shells falling south of Baghdad last night, where Bosch kneeled under the chain guns of helicopters stationed above, their tracer fire a bizarre geometry of light. At dawn, when the shelling finally stops, hundreds of bandages will not be enough to treat the wounded. Let me repeat that last line, because that's right directly from his email. At dawn, when the shelling finally stops, hundreds of bandages will not be enough to treat the wounded. 2. Bosch is walking down aisle 16 now in full combat gear, improbable, worn out from fatigue, with a rifle slung at his side, his left hand guiding a 10-year-old boy who has seen what war is and will never rid it from his head. And I don't know what to say as they come closer. Here, Bosch says to me, take care of this boy. I'm going back in for more. 3. Sheets of plywood drop with the airy breath of mortars in the moment they crack open in shrapnel. The retired couple in the lawn and garden department don't seem to notice. The mower blades are just mower blades, and the Troy-built self-propelled mower doesn't resemble a Blackhawk or an Apache. In fact, no one seems to notice the Casualty Collection Center Doc High is marking out in the ceiling fan department. There on aisle 15, where wounded Iraqis are given IVs and propped up against boxes of Paradiso ceiling fans, 92 sample fans hovering over them in a slow revolution of blades. The forklift driver has over-adjusted, swinging the tines until they slice open gallons and gallons of paint cans, sienna dust, and lemon sorbet and ship's harbor blue, pulling in the aisle where Sergeant Rampley walks through, carrying someone's blown-off arm and his own, cradled like an infant, handing it to me, saying, hold this, Turner. We might find who it belongs to. Cash registers open and slide shut with the sound of machine guns being charged. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, dead soldiers are laid out at the registers, right there on the black conveyor belts, and the people in line keep reaching for their wallets. Am I supposed to read or stand over at the magazine rack reading Landscaping with Stone or the Complete Home Improvement Repair Book? What difference does it make if I choose Tumber Traveltine tile for the bathroom, Botticini Fioretto marble, or black absolute granite? Outside, palm trees line the asphalt boulevards. Restaurants cool their patrons with patio misters, and fireworks explode over Bass Lake in July. Inside, aisle number 7 is a corridor of lights. Each dead Iraqi walks down the corridor, amazed at Tiffany posts and Bavarian pole lights, track lights, pineapple fixtures with pewter gold finishes, motion-activated lights switch on muted incandescence with frosty bulbs as they pass by, reverent sentinels of light, welcoming them to Lowe's Home Improvement Center, aisle number 7, with me here standing in mute shock, someone's arm cradled in my own. The Iraqi boy beside me, reaching down to slide his fingertip in the paint, an interior latex, retro colonial blue, which pools at our feet, before writing T for tourniquet on my forehead. I feel like as a nation, maybe we've been acquiescent for quite a while. I mean, are leaders the decision makers? They the deciders? Or are they the surrogates of our will? What's the relationship there? You know? Is it your life or just someone way up there gets to make the decision? Oh, the president, you know? The vice president, the White House. Or do we put them in office to serve us and they work for us? You know what I mean? There's a lot of things I'm fairly angry about, and I apologize if I come across too much with that. But when like again, if we go with the lowest figure, if you put 100,000 people in the earth and you have culpability, like I feel complicit in that process, what I'm saying is never again should we allow soldiers to go to a country and slaughter people as we did in Iraq and we're a part of now still. 2.5 million is the number. That's what's usually given for how many Iraqis have fled the country. How many have come to America? You know? You know Sweden has taken more than us? When my unit came back from Iraq, 12 of the translators we work with had their heads cut off. Right? So those living that have helped us out to help their country as well with that project, some of them might want to leave the country because maybe they no longer feel safe after having done the work they did. How many have we allowed among us after we invaded their country, for example? The town, if you go to Stockholm and you go about 20 kilometers southwest of Stockholm, you'll find a small town called Södertälje. It's about 60 to 70,000 people. 60 to 70,000, right? They have taken more than all of America has taken into their town. The mayor of that town came to us and said, hey, can you help us out? You know, maybe a few dollars here and there since we're shouldering a lot of this weight. So look this stuff up. See for yourself. I'll read one more poem from this, and then if you can indulge, maybe one poem that's not even mine at all. Is that cool? I won't get fired or anything? Okay, sure. Not even my poem, so. This poem is, I went to the VA medical hospital in Palo Alto, and I walked with the administrator through the TBI ward, the traumatic brain injury ward. And she gave us, she said, this is a campus, right? They call it a campus. This is where we do this type of work. And then 20 miles away, or 20 minutes away by driving, there's another campus, part of the VA hospital, for those soldiers who've served in Iraq or Afghanistan who've been raped by other soldiers. It's another campus. And females that are over there, female veterans, soldiers, and Marines and things. And attached to that is another one with men. And this is a very taboo thing in the military. I never even heard of it till she told me. But this story probably won't get out. Maybe not even in my lifetime, I don't know. But that is attached to it because that's a campus for males who've been raped by other men while serving in the same place, in a combat zone. And I tried to think, for example, of my sister, if she had joined, for example, and raised her hand, did our bidding, went over to a combat zone where people are actively trying to kill her, and yet someone she works with. And what really disturbed me, too, is the administrator said that it was usually from the NCO Corps, the sergeants, like myself, you know? And there's a certain code that you're supposed to live up to as a sergeant, and it really infuriated me. And this poem comes from that. It starts with a quote from Awad Nasir, who is an Arabic poet, who says, "Sleep, for your skin, if you wake, will not be able to bear the sting of arrows." It's called insignia. The last thing you need to know, sergeant, 3 stripes, staff sergeant with a rocker. She hides under the Dusenhaft this time, sleeping on a roll of foam, draped in mosquito netting. Sandflies hover throughout the night. She sleeps under vehicle exhaust and heat, dreaming of mortars sleeping beside her, 3 stripes painted on each cold tube, a rocker of yellow hung below. It's you she's dreaming of, Sergeant. She'll dream of you for years to come, if she makes it out of this country alive, which she probably will. You will be the fire and the hovering breath, not the sniper, not the bomber in the streets. You. And so I'm here to ask for this one night's reprieve. Let her sleep tonight. Let her sleep. Pause a moment here under the stars. Smoke. The gin your wife sent from New Jersey, colored mint green with food dye disguised in a bottle of mouthwash. Take a long swig of it. Take the edge out of your knuckles. Let it blur the stars into a tremor of lights. The explosions in the distance are not your own. In these long hours before dawn, here on the banks of the Tigris River, let her sleep. In her dream, your eyes are pools of rifle oil. You unsheathe the bayonet from its scabbard, and she waits. On a mattress of sand and foam, there in the motor pool, she waits to kiss bullets into your mouth. I promise it's a short poem. 8-point font. It's a little bit bigger, actually, but hopefully I can read it. It's really small. One first paragraph. See how small it is? By Yehuda Amichai. And I read that poem near the beginning called 2,000 Pounds. That was 4 pages long. Okay? Went around the traffic circle. Let's see what this guy does in one verse stanza. I think it's pretty amazing. And it's called The Diameter of the Bomb. The diameter of the bomb was 30 centimeters. And around the diameter of its effective range, about 7 meters, with 4 dead and 11 wounded. And around these, in a larger circle of pain and time, 2 hospitals are scattered and 1 graveyard. But the young woman who is buried in the city she came from, at a distance of more than 100 kilometers, enlarges the circle considerably. And the solitary man mourning her death at the distant shores of a country far across the sea includes the entire world in the circle. And I won't even mention the howl of orphans as it reaches up to the throne of God and beyond, making a circle with no end and no God. Thank you very much.